It's hard to believe, but we are all the way back around to middle grade March. So I'm sure you're familiar, but just in case you're not, there are 3 ladies who lead the middle grade March effort. I will go ahead and link all of their channel information below so that you can go and check out their channels. But they come up with prompts every year, and they also come up with a group read. And so what I wanted to do today is to share with you my recommendations for choices as you prepare your middle grade March TBRs. So these are books that I've read that I would fit into the prompts. So just really quickly, the 2 group reads are The Secret Garden and Plotting the Stars Moongarden. So I will talk more about these book choices in my TBR video for middle grade March, which should be coming very soon. For now, though, I am going to focus on this huge stack of books that I've gathered for the prompts for middle grade March. All right, I've got my notebook that I'm looking at here. So I'm going to start with listing what the prompts are, because some of these choices fit into multiple categories. And so I want to make sure that I let you know that, because sometimes you could choose one book and that would fit for multiple categories. So if you have a lot on your plate and you just want to read one, then one would suffice for multiple prompts. So the prompts are having an author with 3 names on the cover, flowers on the cover, includes travel, being part of a series, and published in the 1900s. So as someone who's born in the 1900s, that makes it sound really old, which, being that it was 25 years ago that the 2000s began, I guess it is. Also, because I am sharing so many books, I actually haven't counted them all, I'm not going to go into depth over them, or this will be too long of a video. So I'm going to try really hard to just give kind of a brief synopsis or share why I think it would be a good read, just trying to keep it really brief and get through all of these books. Let's go ahead and dive into the category of authors with 3 names. Originally, when I first saw them, I thought that would be the one that would be the most challenging to find. But as I started to walk around my bookshelves and kind of look through my lists, that's actually one that I could find a lot of books for. I'm going to start really quickly with just some fun middle grade fantasy. So the first one is Violet and Joby in the Wild. This is by Lynn Ray Perkins. We've honestly read other books by Lynn Ray Perkins, so I think as an author, she is a great choice all around. But we especially love Violet and Joby. This is the story of 2 mice who live in a home, and they get caught and have a heart trap and end up getting taken and released out in the wild. And they have to learn to survive in the wild within the mice community. It's adorable, and I love the sibling relationship. So great. Next, I have Gail Carson Levine. Again, I think as an author, any of her books would be a hit. This one is A Tale of Two Castles. I love her fantasy tale elements with strong female characters. She's very creative, and you really just can't go wrong with her books. Then another one that I have is Samantha San Miguel. She wrote Spineless. My kids and I read this last year when we were down in Florida. It just had such a great Everglades beachy vibe to it, and I love the fantasy in this. It's a little scary actually, but it turns out okay. There is a villain in this, but it is about a boy who befriends 2 kind of wild girls who are very brave and kind of encourage him to be brave, and they have to uncover a mystery, and it's about saving animals and helping the environment, and just a fun read all the way around. Next, I have a classic, which is Mary Mapes Dodge, and she wrote Hans Brinker or The Silver Skates. This is a classic. It really reads like a classic, so this would not be, I don't think, for your younger middle grades, but I do think, your tweens would be great to read this. It is a good sort of historical fiction feeling of it. I just love how it does kind of give you a snapshot in history, in time, in a northern country's environment. And I love the tenacity and the persevering nature of the characters in this book. And as I mentioned, books fitting in other categories, Hans Brinker would fit for a book written in the 1900s. So I know with Hans Brinker, I mentioned that historical fiction feel. These are actually historical fictions, and they, again, continue in that authors with the 3-name category. First, we have Raiders of the Sea, and this is by Lois Walfrid Johnson. One of the other prompts is that they are is a book that is part of a series. This is a book 1 in a series of, I believe, 5 books. My kids both love this historical fiction middle grade story. This is about a young girl who is a Christian and she gets kidnapped by Vikings. There is a little bit of a love story that's in there, but there is also sort of this growth and interaction surrounding the Christian faith with regards to the people who take this young lady. So it's full of adventure on the high seas and also, like I mentioned, love and the Christian faith. Next, I just grabbed 2 of the Clyde Robert Bula books off of our shelves. We actually have a couple. We've actually read a couple and not actually enjoyed them as much, but these 2 are absolute hits in our family. This one is The Beast of Lore. There's not a lot of middle grade historical fiction books surrounding the time when the Romans came and invaded Britain, and this book is during that time. So it's a very unique find to be able to bring history alive. And so we did this as a read aloud as a family and really loved it. It's not, it's not huge print. It doesn't take very long, but really great. And then I also have A Lion to Guard Us, about children who are in a ship leaving London to go to Jamestown. Again, kind of a unique perspective and a story that can bring to life that time in history for your middle graders. And these were also written in the 1900s. Next is Bluebirds by Carolyn Starr Rose. She actually wrote Maybe also, which I think she is probably more well known for. But this is actually a book in verse, and it is the story of 2 girls who basically befriend each other. So you have this European girl who has traveled to the city of Roanoke. There's the story in time of the lost city of Roanoke that this story entails. And again, very unique time in history that this book dives really into. And then we have this young native girl and they see each other. They have trouble, obviously don't communicate the same language, and yet they continue to go back and forth talking about all of their interactions and also what's happening in each of their communities. So just, again, a really unique perspective on a time and place in history that sometimes is overlooked. Next, I've got, before I move on, this one is flowers on the cover. So this one would work for the flowers on the cover prompt as well. So next we have Laurie Halse Anderson. I think she's actually pretty well known for all of these, but this is her main series, the Seeds of America trilogy. And it is Chains, Forge, and Ashes. This is pretty hard hitting. Obviously, I mean, you can just really tell by the cover. We follow Isabel throughout all of these, and these are set in the Revolutionary War time. They really are intense and hard hitting, tackling some very heavy topics, but well worth the time. If you're looking for something that's a little bit less hard-hitting, there is Fever 1793. This is about the true story about this disease that comes to Philadelphia. So in the back matter, it says that in 3 months, the yellow fever in 1793 killed 10% of the population in Philadelphia. It was a very widespread epidemic, one of the worst in United States history. So, and they really couldn't understand what was going on. The doctors would do like bloodletting and things. But anyway, this young girl manages to escape the fever. And it's just all about her sort of experience around the city, seeing what's going on to see how the disease ravages the community and also how they end up eradicating it. And then lastly, I have Lisa Klein Ransom. I've read a couple of her books, and I would recommend Finding Langston. This is the story of a boy named Langston who we think ends up being Langston Hughes, who's a famous poet, but his childhood experiences of being uprooted and moved to Chicago. And there's just memorable scenes in this. It's very thin, but I think about his first experience with the library, for instance, and how powerful that is to give access to a child to reading. Just a wonderful story. And again, it's not super thick and just very well written and obviously acclaimed. Next, the category is flowers on the cover. And I wanted to highlight The Carver and the Queen. This is by Emma C. Fox. What I love about this is that it takes this Slavic folklore about the Malachite Queen, or it's also known as the mistress of the Ural Mountains or Copper Mountains, and creates this beautiful world. There's love in it. There is betrayal and brutality, but also just this underlining theme of hope. And I think the cover is beautiful, and this does have flowers on it. It also could work for travel as well, because there is some traveling in this. And it could be part of a series, because Emma C. Fox just announced that she is going to be publishing the second book in this world under Owl's Nest Publisher. So I'm excited about that. And I would recommend considering picking this up for this middle grade March. Also, with flowers on the cover is K.B. Hoyle's Son of Gold and Sorrow. And this is a retelling of the French fairy tale, The Story of Pretty Goldilocks, which should not be confused with Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's an entirely different story. But this also could be travel as well as flowers on the cover. And it is very much a journey quest story. And there's romance in this. So again, probably for your older middle grade readers, but a lovely story of redemption and vulnerability and honesty, and just a very creative retelling book. Then we have The Whisperwicks, The Labyrinth of the Lost and Found. This is by Jordan Lees. That also has flowers on the cover, and this also could be a travel book, and I also think it could be part of a series. I don't know about anything that's coming out, but it is marked as book number 1 by the publisher. And this is a fantasy take on Jason and the Minotaur. So we've got the story of the red thread and having to follow through a maze, but it's also a story of sibling love and losing someone that you care for and not giving up on them, and building a friendship with someone and learning to trust someone that maybe originally you don't. There are some kind of creepy elements to this, but just a fun story, and one that I would recommend you checking out for the travel element and also the flower on the cover. And then I feel like I always recommend this book for middle grade March, but this is Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus by Dusty Bowling. There's your little flower on the cover with the cactus. And this also could be the part of a series, because there's a second book, which is Momentous Events in the Life of a Cactus. So my oldest has finished both books. She said this one is better. I've only read this one, and I loved this one. So in this one, we follow a young girl who was born without arms. And so she has to do everything with her feet and other parts of her body. I just love, it's from her perspective. I just love her viewpoint. I love her family. She has a friend who has Tourette's syndrome. And again, I love how there's sort of this stereotype, and that is not the case in this book. It's just a very real look at people who have disabilities, but who are exceeding at life. And she ends up in a mystery. It's just a fun read. I love it so much. I love getting to see her daily life, but also seeing her kind of try to figure out the mystery. My oldest and I did figure out the mystery pretty early on, but the book was still fantastic. Next, for travel, I have Fern of the Forest by J.L. Thaxton. This comes out March 4th, and this has travel in it, and I absolutely loved this story so much. So far, it's been one of my favorite reads of the year. It is pretty thin. In this, we have a girl who, her mother is a doctor. She was adopted when she was young, after having been found by a hiker in the woods. And she's starting to have this weird physical challenges with lots of headaches, lethargy, just generally not feeling well. She has a huge episode where she passes out on the subway, and her mom basically decides that they need to move. And they move to this town, and it's kind of weird, and you're realizing that like something's not right about this town. And then everything changes, and suddenly it all makes sense. But it is such a fun read. And so if you're looking for an option for that travel prompt, Fern of the Forest is a great one. Then we have Lightfall by Tim Probert. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I feel like, again, I talk about this book a lot. But this is a graphic novel. It is about a young girl named Bee. So Bee's adopted grandfather goes missing, and she has to go on a journey to try to find him. She connects up with the Galdurian, who is the last of his kind, and they both kind of end up traveling together to try to find her adopted pig keeper grandfather. But it turns out that there is so much more than just looking for her grandfather that ends up happening. And there are, I believe, 3 books in this series that have already come out. So this could be a part of the series prompt as well, in addition to travel. But if you haven't read Lightfall, I would recommend looking at your library for this, because it's just beautiful and so great. Next is by The Great Horn Spoon. This is by Sid Fleischman. This is traveling out to the California gold fields during the California gold rush. This would fit as a book that was written in the 1900s, as it was written in 1963. My kids and I read this together as a read aloud. It's funny. It gives you a feel for what it was like to be traveling, and how they traveled to get to the gold rush was also new to me. I didn't realize that that was a way, but it turns out I did research and it absolutely was. So just a great travel book, but then also learning about that time in history, wonderful option. And then Beryl Nethercliff's The Snowstorm. I just finished this January. This was written in 1967, so this is also a 1900s book as well as a travel book. But if you liked The Children of Green Know by L.M. Boston, you will love this. I don't want to give too much away about this, but it's fun. It's about children who end up going to their aunt's house. It's this kind of dark, creepy house, and there's things that are happening in this house that they can't really explain. But I'll tell you what, as kids, they're like, yeah, we're here for this. So just really fun. I loved it a lot. Okay, next we have part of a series. So I wanted to try to come up with 4 options in each category at least. I know we've kind of exceeded that, but the first one is the Land of Elyon series. This is a series of 4 books, and it is about a young girl who is living in kind of this fortress area, and she can communicate with animals. There are just really evil things that are happening outside of the walls, and she gets involved because the animals need her involvement. So my youngest has read the whole series. I've read the first one because he was like, you have to read this. But even the cover is just adorable with the squirrel. So really great series. And then next we have the Polar Bear Explorers Club. We have 3 of them. I'm not sure if there's more. I've read the first one, and my kids have read the rest of the series. But in this, we have Stella Starflake Pearl, and her dad is a scientist, and she gets approval to go with her dad to the north. There is a little bit of question about her origin, like where did she come from? And there's a very big focus in their culture for explorers. So it's like you're very high esteemed if you are an explorer. But through this, there is adventure, there is peril, are dangerous characters, and you're not sure if she can trust some of the other kids that are on the expedition, and it's just really fun. And then this really ends on you're like, oh my gracious. And so you're probably going to want to have the second one at the ready, but just really a fun story and great for a cold setting. And then, of course, being part of a series. This is The Stormkeeper's Island by Catherine Doyle. I have read a couple of her books. She writes now more in the romantasy genre, but I like her middle grade work best. But this is a series. I only have the first book in the series. The concept is so unique, and that's why I loved it. So we have a young family that have come back to the island and are living with a grandfather. And there is a history on this island that this family has really been a big part of. And over time, that has changed. And so these kids are sort of unpacking what's actually going on the island. I just loved the world building in this and kind of how you felt transported. And since it's part of a series, this would be a great option. And then I decided to add Homer Price. This is by Robert McCloskey. Robert McCloskey wrote Make Way for Ducklings and quite a few other children's books, Blueberries for Sal, A Time for Wonder. Anyway, he also wrote Homer Price. And this is really written in the style of little like vignettes. So each story, it might relate to each other, like they'll mention a previous story, but otherwise each chapter is its own little story about the antics of Homer Price. And it's just a lovely experience. And then the second book in the series is The Centerburg Tales, which just continues Homer's life in his crazy town. So this also would fit not only for the series prompt, but also for books written in the 1900s. All right, we've come to the last pile. These are books that were published in the 1900s. So I always recommend Summer of the Monkeys by Wilson Rawls. This book is one of my favorite books ever. I love the family interaction. It is laugh out loud funny. I rarely laugh out loud when I'm reading books, and I laughed out loud reading this. And then it also is a tearjerker. But unlike Where the Red Fern Grows, which is a tearjerker and you feel like your heart's been ripped out and stomped on and thrown out, this one is a tearjerker in all the good ways. So Wilson Rawls redeemed himself in this by writing Summer of the Monkeys. So if you haven't read it, this is your sign. And then another one that I love from the 1900s is Miracles on Maple Hill. This is by Virginia Sorensen. This is a family that moves, so you probably could do this for the travel prompt as well. They move to the country, and the father has PTSD and war injuries, and the family kind of is regrouping and trying to adjust to that just as he is, and the community is there and supportive, and it's just a beautiful tale that was written in the 1900s. The next two are actually raccoon books. The first one is Calamity Jane, and this is by Sam Campbell. This was written in 1962. This is also part of a series. We have only read the first book and loved it so much. It is, I think it's a true story. It follows Calamity Jane and her babies. She is a unicorn. She is a raccoon, and we learn all about her life with her little ones, and it's just lovely. And then this is Sterling North's Rascal. This was written in, I think, 1963. I think this is also based in fact as well. And it is a story, a memoir of a better era. I think it's a story of his childhood and his life with a raccoon. So this is really great for your, older middle grade that loves nature. I would say specifically if you've got, male readers that maybe would prefer a male protagonist at times, this would be a great option. If you like My Side of the Mountain, this is great. It's very much like a nature experiential book. So we've made it through that huge stack of books, and I counted, and I think I held up almost 40 books in this video. So hopefully I went fast enough. Hopefully this gives you some ideas for books to get from your library for middle grade March this year. And then here are the books that I have set aside for my middle grade March experience. And I am going to do a TBR video. So make sure that you subscribe so that you can see what I'm gonna read for middle grade March this year. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.